Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Joanna Yaz, Readings and Special Programs Manager of the NYU Creative Writing Program. We're so honored to host tonight's event presented by Canem, Poets on Craft, Black Queer Memoirs. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to Malcolm Tarek, Canem's Programs and Communications Manager, who'll tell you a bit about the order of events tonight and will introduce the authors. Here you go, Malcolm.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Malcolm Tariq, and I'm the Programs and Communications Manager at Canem, North America's premier home for Black poetry. Tonight's event is our second of the spring season, and we're delighted that you can join us. This Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Canem will host a featured event at AWP 2021, a legacy conversations with poets C.S. Giscombe and Nathaniel Mackey, moderated by Jari Bradley. Please follow us at Canem Poets on social media and visit our webpage to sign up for our monthly newsletter where we list upcoming events, share upcoming workshops, and announce submissions for our book contest. And we just opened submissions for the 2021 Canem Poetry Prize, which is being judged by Rachel Eliza Griffiths. You can also visit the upcoming events section on our homepage to learn more about where you can find us next and for the rest of the month. I'm happy to introduce Cynthia Norman, who will be providing ASL interpretation tonight. We've been honored to work with her since the fall. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thank you so much to Joanna and the NYU creative writing team for inviting us back. It's always such a joy to work with you, and I'm really looking forward to being in the creative writing house again this year or next year sometime soon. So I'm going to introduce the series tonight and our presenters, and then I'm just going to hand it off to them. Launched in 2008, Poets on Craft features conversations between poets of color. And in these moderated discussions, poets explore such topics as strategies, voice, new and involving forms, and the complexities of working with and against the canon. Tonight, I'm honored to present Pamela Sneed, Arisa White, and Mace Dent Johnson, three amazing poets who are personally very special to me. Pamela, I found on the public library stacks when I was a very young poet in Savannah, Georgia. Arisa selected my chapbook for publication prize about 4 years ago, I think. And Mace, I met shortly after, and we were both fellows at the Canem retreat. I continue to learn from and admire these poets, and tonight we'll get an in-depth look at how they work. First, Pamela will read from her latest collection, Funeral Diva, and Arisa will read from Who's Your Daddy, which was just released this week, I believe. So yay, congrats to you, so excited. Then Mace will enter into conversation with the poets about these intense, complex, and much needed books. I'm gonna introduce our speakers. Pamela Sneed is a New York-based poet, writer, performer, and visual artist, author of Imagine Being More Afraid of Freedom Than Slavery, Kong and Other Works, Sweet Dreams, and two chaplets, Gift and Black Panther. She was featured in the New York Times Magazine, the New Yorker, Hyperallergic, and on the cover of New York Magazine. She is online faculty in SAIC's low-residency MFA program, teaching human rights and writing art, and she also teaches new genres in Columbia University School of the Arts. Sneed has performed at several museums and venues across North America, and her visual poetry work is currently on view at Whitman Walker. In 2018, she was nominated for 2 Pushcart Prizes in poetry. Her latest poetry and prose book, Funeral Diva, was featured in the New York Times and Publishers Weekly. Arisa White is an assistant professor of creative writing at Colby College and a Canem fellow. She serves on the board of directors for Foglifter and Nomadic Press. She is the co-editor of the recently released anthology, Home is Where You Queer Your Hearts. So lots of publications for Arisa lately, and co-author of the middle grade biography, Bibi Mason Speaks Up, winner of the 2020 Maine Literary Award for Young People's Literature. Published by Augury Books in 2021, Who's Your Daddy is Arisa's recently released poetic memoir, which Patricia Smith says unreels like heart-wrenching fragments of film. And finally, Mace Dent Johnson is a writer and artist from Columbus, Georgia. They are currently a creative writing MFA candidate in the poetry program at Washington University in St. Louis. They are a Cave Canem and Watering Hole Fellow. I'll now pass it over to Pamela Sneed. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Okay, so Arisa, I wanted to say congratulations on your book. I've been a longtime fan, and I remember, I think, writing something for your first book, right?
Yeah, for You're the Most Beautiful Thing That Happened.
Yes, yeah. So I love that work, and I can't wait to dive into Who's Your Daddy. And thank you, NYU, and everybody who invited me here today. And I'm going to be reading from Funeral Diva. But this was something that I wrote this summer. And this is called 8 minutes, 46 seconds. That they would sit on a man's neck till his body, breath, spirit gave out, that they rendered him inaudible, voiceless, that 8 minutes passed, 8 minutes, 46 seconds. It took days and citizens' uprisings for the police officers involved to be arrested, that the news showed that one officer casually sitting on the black man's neck, as if the man below were a deer, mountain grizzly, a bounty trophy subdued, until there was no wrestling, no life left, that the great AIDS activist Larry Kramer would die days later, that we all owe him something of our lives, that his memorial went on, that the chat closed before I could say again, thank you, Larry Kramer. Keep fighting. Before I could type George Floyd's name in the chat box, say the two were connected in the struggle for human rights. And I want to shout out to a poet tonight. As part of the Other Countries Collective that I write about in Funeral Diva, and Colin Robinson has passed on. So. Rope-a-dope. I had just begun to relax, celebrate the marriage equality ruling. I had just begun feeling with Obama I was watching Ali in trouble off the ropes, delivering to his opponents the rope-a-dope, my father's eyes, excitement. I was just beginning to breathe air, feel exhilarated at images of Joe Biden and President Obama running down halls of the White House with rainbow flags like boys with kites soaring. I was just beginning to forgive debts of my brothers to AIDS, not forget. There should still be tribunals for them and every woman abused by the medical system. I had just begun to turn a corner on Mike Brown, Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, the massacre at AME, and not think of it all every day. Then the police killed this young Black girl in custody in Texas, claimed she committed suicide. And I remember we're a war nation in war times. I imagine how James Bayard Nina felt seeing a nation turn its dogs, teeth, gas, hoses, bullets on children, adults, humans. I can't stop thinking about Steve Biko, his battered face. They say he hung himself too. The world's outrage. Who will pray now for us? America. At the end of every Holocaust film I've seen, and there are not that many, they show real life survivors and say the words, never again. And some of us like me stare into these films down the long tunnels of history, wondering how it could have ever happened at all. That a leader and his minions could be so toxic, so poisonous, you'd turn against your neighbors. You could be so brainwashed, oblivious, scared, desperate to be superior or to survive, you do anything, or almost. They say, never again. But it is again. As I look at the deportations, roundups, I'm reminded of Idi Amin when he cast out foreigners and Forrest Whitaker in the film The Last King of Scotland when he played him. And to see it is again at rallies, at protests, they show the coat hangers and crude instruments women were forced to use in back alley abortions. We say never again, but taking away women's choice in Planned Parenthood, it is again. Today started out in an argument with someone who didn't understand why I mentioned race so much in my new book. And that white man is not the first, a Black woman asked too. I wanted to scream, hello, haven't you seen the news? Didn't you see what happened to Stephon Clark, unarmed and shot in the back 6 times by police? And who even cares what happens to women, Black lesbians, lesbians of color? There's no public outcry. A student once wrote to me in an academic paper that a parent forced her to stop playing sports because they said sports made her more of a dyke. It killed my student inside because she was an athlete. So the white guy I argued with about my book said he was just giving me some good advice from his experience as an empath. I said, I don't need your advice. I have reasons for talking about race and gender in the interpersonal. He said he was just trying to help me. I'll offer this non sequitur. Winnie Mandela died a few years ago. She had great impact on me. I read she was nobility, but then the difference between her and say how Princess Diana was treated, everyone accepted and loved Diana's silent, passive status. She was allowed to be gorgeous. No one ever associated with her that dirty colonial stain. There are moments in the recent Winnie Mandela documentary that stand out to me, where she buried her face in her hands and screamed out, as I have so many times, I've been betrayed. The other moment was when she said she was the only ANC member brought to CRC made to testify that Nelson Mandela forgave a nation, but he could never forgive her. What was done to Winnie is done to other Black women and working artists, Black women fighting to give language, resistance, but it only matters when a celebrity says or does it. At Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, after you've passed the door of no return, there is a plaque donated to the castle by the Black tribal elders. It reads, may we never sell ourselves into slavery again. But it is. Again. Say what you want about my mother. I know her cruelty knew no bounds, neglect, never a warm hug, kind word. Every year when school came fall, I looked at the flyers of back to school clothes, nothing. I wore rags, hand-me-downs. As soon as I worked, she made me pay rent, and that was the message engraved into me. Instead of being taught responsibility, I was taught I owed her rent, the ground I stood on, had no rights. My father's neglect, the patches put over his eyes not to see, never a book, nothing. She suffers from mental illness, is selfish. Through blinds, through stories, I get glimpses. Say what you want, but she is the greatest fighter. She is going now. She cobbles out a life from the women she watches on housewife shows, their competition. Her neighbor buys a wreath. My mother buys a bigger one. She tells my father when I visit, strike up the barbecue. She buys corn, pretends it's a party. I see she has lost weight this visit. The depression, she believes that there is a man coming to destroy things and there are bugs. She constantly buys poison. I know I can't talk to her about the depression, the drugs, so I say as gently as I can, keep your spirits up and then you will gain back the weight. On the morning I am leaving, she dresses up in nice clothes and a pair of coral earrings I gave her. She said she'd been skipping meals, but on the morning before I left, perhaps as a child just to show me, she piled her plate full of scrambled eggs and ketchup, and she ate. I'm not sure why, but it's taken forever for me to write this poem. I hope to remember all the pieces, but I've developed a new condition, one that's come from age. I can no longer take the shit that I once did. And there's a part of my condition that comes from gentrification and cell phone use, living amidst tech zombies and their general fear and hatred of people of color. My condition is called sidewalk rage. It's kind of like road rage, but it comes when I'm walking down the street and there's some millennial who's just moved into the neighborhood who thinks it's theirs, a white girl who in broad daylight feels a dark presence walking behind her. It's me, minding my own business, and she gets so panicked and paralyzed, she stops walking and holds her purse. With my new condition, I yell, if you don't want to live around Black people, get the fuck out of their neighborhood. She is in shock. Or in another scenario, you see random white women on their phones, standing in a doorway, completely blocking it because, you know, only they exist. And you're like, hello, hello. Yes, all of these years, I thought I was still a small town girl. And then suddenly with my sidewalk rage, I'm a bona fide New Yorker. Like the ones you've seen on bicycles banging on the hood of a taxi cab that tries to cut them off. My person with sidewalk rage is a character of their own, where once I was silent. Recently, I confronted a man who was blocking my path crossing the street. He had his head down and almost rammed into me. I sucked my teeth really loud and shouted, hello, hello, move. He was so angry, I confronted him. He yelled, suck my dick. I started to yell something profane, but I stopped myself. And then I was in the subway going downstairs and a white man rammed into me on the phone. My sidewalk rage kicked in and I thought for a second to sneak behind him and kick him down the stairs. That's my sidewalk rage, but I stopped myself. I don't know who this person is in me who would never speak up for herself, was always soft and vulnerable, who's been at various times pickpocketed, blasphemed, body slammed, ransacked, ridiculed, who now has a voice, who now lets rage show, who couldn't express herself, has now become all angles and sharp edges. And I'm going to read a last one. And it's called, I can find it, A Tale of Two Pandemics. The headline in yesterday's news blared a tale of two pandemics, shocking inequities in the healthcare system. What got me was the use of the word shocking in two. Those of us who lived through the 1980s, early 90s AIDS crisis already knew about the existence of two New Yorks, two 20, 30, 40, 50 Americas, maybe more, depending on age, race, class, citizenship, status, entirely different systems for those who aren't white, straight, middle class. Those of us who saw our brothers, friends, sisters die at the hands of a system that shunned, refused to treat, threw away the unwanted. Still can't forget a gay friend waiting for Medicaid to treat HIV. He got sicker and sicker. I asked why Medicaid took so long. He said they're waiting to see if I'll die first. That wasn't the America I learned about in elementary school. I was instructed to put my hand over my heart and salute. That wasn't the free America we sang of. People who are LGBTQIA already know that there are two Americas. A doctor who kept forcing me to take a pregnancy test, even after I insisted at the time, I only have sex with women. I saw his scorn, still a test he made me pay for. And then those women who were forcibly sterilized, had wombs, their life force taken, left dry, barren by doctors who never even stopped to explain, felt entitled to take, scar women's bodies, breasts cut off, no options or consolation given. Women who aren't rich and white already know invisible lines you can't cross with no insurance or Medicaid, forced into black markets for drugs, a land of botched care, botched procedures. Black people already know separate doors, separate entrances, treatments, options existing long after Jim Crow. And I have kept waiting for this moment. This time of a medical Me Too, when those who have suffered from botched procedures and the indignities step from the shadows, speak, and name the atrocities committed, medical malpractice. I won't blame all doctors. Some are good, just like middlemen, like so many in a broken system doing what they can. And I'm grateful for the good ones in this pandemic risking their own lives. But the image of medical researchers that we see in movies and on television who understand a complex problem, pour through medical books and science journals, stay up all night burning midnight oil to find a cure, who weep with concern, are mostly false. rare like the ones who find cures and refuse to patent or personally profit. Those days have become a myth. What's replaced them are businessmen wanting status amongst peers, entry to country clubs and power, gaslighters, hustlers, actors like Trump. There is a doctor at Mount Sinai, star of his field, charged with drugging and raping his patients. Nobody believed it until it was proven. His victims were only Black women. The rest, he left alone. Thank you.
Amazing, Pamela. So good to hear you. It's just bringing me back to Fort Greene, Brooklyn, late 90s, Brooklyn Moon, when I would just pretty much like stalk you. It's like a dream and a pleasure to be reading with you. Thank you so much, Canem, for inviting me here, NYU. So I'll jump into reading from Who's Your Daddy? My mother is 19 when she meets Gerald. Handsome, tall, good, healthy teeth, dressed sharp and debonair. He could steal the room. She felt lucky he chose her. 10 years her senior, and she smiles, mostly to herself, remembering him teaching her how to drive. All the places she goes. In his Cadillac down Fulton Street, down Nostrand Ave, without question up and down Atlantic and Pacific, DeKalb, on Eastern Parkway, through Gates in Myrtle, Bushwick and Halsey, sunsets on J. Down this first day of spring, red lights every 2 minutes when contractions start. The cab ride stretches out before the hospital. I am her second child. She has calm nerves, clear expectations, controlled breath, an easy birth. And what she negotiated with Gerald, a married man, about his role in my care definitely included a one-way street. At 4 years old, I hide behind the door to the bedroom I shared with my siblings. Painted royal blue, and I see all the ways my cousin was too heavy with the paint. We are living in a 2-bedroom apartment on Fulton Street in Brooklyn. Gerald comes for a visit, which will be his last, and it is just me and my mother in the apartment. The place is clean, frankincense burning, pine sol mopped floors, and this royal blue I've cornered myself in. Maybe Gerald will not find me here. He doesn't know the floor plan, how I find comfort in closets, in corners where I do not punish myself, but pray. Pray where I am the quietest conversation with myself. But Gerald finds me. Calling my name lures me from believing I am an island. Pulls me across water so indigo there is no bottom. Welcomes me on a shore that slips and slips from under me until my feet trust again. I hear him loud and clear. Why you running from me? I'm your father. My feet resign. Father isn't a place from which I can run. I leave girlhood and enter my own private world. It is 8th grade, pleased my white denim Gap jeans went unstained. I put my sweater on, cross into new territory. No decipherable shift, sniff, sniff, 10 fingers and toes, crackle in my ankle remains, and now I'm fresh dirt, for which I take for my own making, into a woman whose shoulders cup over her heart, head bowed, convex, my cramps turn me. Smoldering fire churns my uterus, perineum, stomach to switchblades and Chinese stars. It takes my mettle to breathe, stand up, sip, because waves of pain tsunamic. Advil, Aleve, codeine, Vicodin, oxycodone are prescriptions to drown. In tears, passed out on stairs, moaning fetal in my bed, because it occurred monthly, my family disables their care. My anger toward them, a sail. I get into a raft away from where it hurts most, a black sand island covered by mist that thins and thickens from cant to cant. No one sees me from the distance taken from female troubles, her time of the month. Left on my own nausea, mouth watering itself, and out it gushes. I dry heave myself to soar. On a scale of 1 to 10, the pain of my wandering womb is blue-violet. This does not compare to the blue-black of Africans, according to my mother. Her period was never this bad. My blood forges through walls, seeps out a quarry of pomegranate, heated and fine, setting things apart with its edges. When I'm this kind of lunatic, my endometriosis casting me in its spell, I must stay away from the water. A whispered command of come to me makes the Hudson River the boats. Spawns joy so spontaneous, a girl takes off her shoes, rolls up her pants, jumps into a university fountain, turns water conga, her body wet, sings the moon into her mouth, then kisses me, wane to full at my dorm door. I don't need to abandon my body to feeling unloved. I find antonyms to past verbs. I fall leagues for a girl whose long red lava she ties into a bun, rubs a balm of raspberry leaf, cramp bark, motherwort, and her honest heat onto my belly, lower back, ankles. I cry. Pain bristles across soft cover spines, throbs towards the languid mist outside my windows, where she secretly watches me when I'm writing, then tiptoes through my apartment, bringing New England brisk, granny tonics, and pirated DVDs. Every month, she calls in sick when pain notates power lines, warble and even song through horsetails to a brand new honeymoon. She holds my pain like a newborn beast in her hands and coos it down. My mother says she has an address in Guyana. You want to write your father? It is through inflection she makes her directives questions. She doesn't intonate high, just enough so her implicit meaning isn't lost to freedom of personal choice. I feel my face up against the bluest door, and it's about to open. I'm not invited to know much about my father's family because the family is concerned I'll write about them. Avery told me this. They kept the black boy magic from me. My father's family bequeathed what Gerald started. In the 10th year of his life, he wrapped his words mute. These words are tight-lipped calories I pitch to the ground just to get inside. They keep the black boy magic from me. It's an unexplored complement that is active, and I do not know its properties. Throws me off kilter like one leg is shorter than the other and caught in a whirlpool. I have a gangster swagger, my stress foot dipping, 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 and turning up wet. What is my spiritual condition? I go from numb to wander. Monday ways framed by the window. Street light halos her head. Crescent moon in the upper right pane, an exponent to her temple. I sit between her legs to get my hair done. The combing, then pomade, the massage over my scalp. She lifts my skull, stretches my stem, and my marooned thick hair, she plaits fishtail. Once completed, Monday Way serves me a glass of welcome, says swim. First, there is sand. My body moves across the rough translation of my name. The sandbar's coarse gravel on my feet is pressure in my lungs, expanding to hold a maiden volume of resurrection. The surf washes me of the terms by which I've been assembled on land. I don't see the plunge coming. I find myself deep and salted, water walking the league that holds me buoyant. I feel the resonance of ocean, great and grand, the way it is one teardrop gigantic, and God, the mother father of them all, speaks to me. It is that rebel pearl diver blood who makes you other than what is expected. It is Negra Azalia, Venezuelan born, beneath shade of trees that scream their hurt when roots are torn. Isla de las Lágrimas. She is the woman who planted your freedom. She's the terra that features most. Without words, who am I is answered. You are that depth of sea survived. When a mother-father says ship, a mother-father means the one from Dutch. Prima madre in its belly, learning ways she is flesh around a seed. Azalea in her womb. When we say ship, we mean Prima was shipped, then shipped. She didn't know where she was. Without question, I know where I am bound. She wanted for her daughter swimming ways. Cape Verde, her island, taught her so. Prima slaved for pearls, carried down into feet by boulders. Prima's body greased a slick allegiance to finding Negra Paca's black pearl. In a league she couldn't quite descend, in the mouth of a diver named Paca was Prima's freedom. The pearl the size of your eye, and many lost sight getting to it. What emerged from Prima's darkest deep wasn't the jewel of another suffering, but home she tasted too frequently in these waters. She blacked out, gave up her air for the drink of it, and rested. A blue-black darkness guides me forward, and I am following Azalea, following Prima, a glowing trinity of albino manta rays, light where Paca drowned, the black pearl set in her mouth. I come from Azalea's lips, that kiss that takes the pearl. And this is the final piece I'll read. D-I-F-G-H, D-I-F-G. D-I-F-G-H, D-I-F-G. Do I forgive him? Do I forgive? What if the question, what is forgiveness, is my own need to solicit an apology, to put a mouth and throat and all the systems that make a body talk onto something I cannot touch, so it can give me sound that bounces off my contours that let me know I'm here, a living beat. What if forgiveness is a matter of breaking up syllables, then arranging the word with a whole new set of feet? What if, can you forgive him, is a means to end the contrast, is a way to ask for our bodies to be proximal. In that asking, I'm proposing that a knowledgeable skill exists, that maybe all the tools we need become real through use. What if this protected reality I made with imagination is let go, and with the release, I've accepted wildness? The proverb says that it's better to have one bird in hand instead of two in the bush. The release will leave me birdless. What if the Father isn't the answer, and I've been seeing it all wrong? There is an unequivocal honesty to Gerald's absence. It is reliable and transparent and hasn't done or said otherwise. Can't I see that? What I know is that absence breeds madness. An irreconcilable relationship you know is there, but can't call it by its name, can't leave it because it's a tree with its root collar breathing around your neck. What if poetry is how I practice my relationship with my whole body? Bodies unknown and not yet born, bodies past, future bodies, bodies present. The father and mother of my poems are two pearls I nacre at any point in time. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you both so much for those incredible readings. And I also just want to thank you both for your work in general. It's really an honor to get to be in conversation with you two, and getting to read these two new books of yours. It's just so apparent, to me, how much I need these books as a Black queer person, as a Black lesbian. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And I'm also supposed to say for people to leave questions in the chat so that for the Q&A, which will happen after this conversation. Yeah, so I wanted to start by talking about form a little bit. Both Funeral Diva and Who's Your Daddy are characterized by hybridity. Funeral Daddy opens with prose memoir essays and moves into long form poetry. And Who's Your Daddy is sometimes lineated, but more often comes in prose paragraphs, sometimes paired with a few short lineated fragmented lines. In a way, both books seem to queer form and to queer the definition of poetry as memoir, or poetry and memoir as possibly separate at all. And especially as multidisciplinary artists, both of you working in poetry, nonfiction, children's literature, performance, visual art. I'm just wondering, in general, how do you approach form? Do you think of your books as hybrid, these two new books? And how do you find the right container for whatever narrative or idea you're working on? Pamela, you're muted.
Oh, I'm muted?
There you go.
Am I muted? Okay. Oh, so who's going first? You know, I mean, I believe that I'm rather militant about form in the sense that I believe you should take any form that you want to get it done, you know, to get the story done, right? And I don't feel that form should be regimented, you know. So basically, yes, I consider Funeral Diva to be hybrid, mixed form, and that is the form of the future. I mean, it's always been this way, but then what is it? I don't know. People started getting very purist about, you know, what was poetry, what was fiction, what was memoir, and it kept a lot of people out, you know. But you know, I mean, like everybody quotes Shakespeare or something like that. Shakespeare was multidisciplinary, right? You know, wrote plays, you know, monologues, you know, poetry, prose, everything. So yeah, we went through this whole period where everything was factionalized, and now it's not, and the writers are, you know, breaking through and forcing people to read and to look at us. It's more in the tongue that we speak anyway. You know, we don't break up our language and say, oh, now I'm speaking to you in poetry. Now I'm speaking to you in prose. You know what I mean? We speak all of those things and they're mixed together. And so it's more natural that hybrid literature exists, you know?
Yeah, I would definitely call the work hybrid. I would even say, you know, what readers don't necessarily get to witness is the process to creating the book. And for me, that feels very communal and co-creative. And so, especially with Who's Your Daddy, it took so many different stages. You know, my mom asked me if I wanted to write my father in Guyana, and my way of thinking about how to communicate with him was it started through a series of epistolary poems. So there, just in the beginning of this, I was already blending forms. And because I was really trying to find language for how to make sense of the absence, what would I say? And also really employing documentary poetics as well as a way to think about my ideas or my feelings or my hurt being in conversation with text, cultural studies, YouTube videos about love. You know, Erica Badu, I'm constantly quoting throughout because she was sort of the soundtrack that went along with those years. And so just sort of the process of making the work, I opened up to so many different ways of organizing, different narrative modes. I was in a museum for a good chunk of what became the last section of Who's Your Daddy? And that started out as prose, really in this sort of ekphrastic kind of way, responding to the artwork. And that helped me develop that motif of blue and water that was developing. And so I think just kind of looking outside of what is poetry, what is prose, or just even the textual world and to the larger world itself, form is all over. And it's just like a matter of figuring out which one is going to work best to help me tell the story I'm trying to tell.
Great, thank you both for those answers. Yeah, definitely has me thinking. And Arisa, I'm glad you bring up water. So I'm thinking about the role water plays in both of these new books. In both Funeral Diva and Who's Your Daddy, the speakers experience a return to ancestral waters that seem central to their transformations and acceptances, revelations. In both books, this travel is contingent on the involvement or guidance or misguidance of a male figure, Joshua and Ghana in Funeral Diva and Gerald and Guyana in Who's Your Daddy. And both of these journeys involve the presence of a lover, Joshua and Ghana in Funeral Diva and Monday Way in Who's Your Daddy. So I'm just wondering about each of your connections to water and how travel, especially traveling while Black and queer to historically salient places, like what does that do to your writing? What does that do to you as a writer?
Well, this is the first time anyone has actually asked me about Joshua. So that's like,
Wow.
it's interesting to even hear, you know, their name out loud, right? You know, because everyone just talks about like, you know, lesbian content and stuff like that. Like no one has mentioned him.
Wow.
Uh, so I think that that's like interesting.
Mhm.
And I asked, I think my editor, I was like, you know, like how do you think people feel that, you know, I talk about like sex with men as well as sex with women or something like that? And she was like, oh, it just doesn't matter anymore. So, okay, you know, all right, cool. But I think it's interesting that it hasn't been mentioned. Yeah, until now. But yeah, Ghana, I think, was just transformative, you know. I mean, and I didn't go, you know, like necessarily thinking I was going on an ancestral, you know, sort of pilgrimage. I thought I was just, you know, a tourist. And but then it ended up being like the most, you know, profound experience of my life, right? And like somebody offhandedly said, you have to go to Cape Coast, you have to go to Cape Coast. And then I had met Joshua, and he was a guide, and he took me to Cape Coast. And I mean, that's interesting because there's a lot of Christianity in Ghana and stuff like that. And like, you know, he was a Christian, and like, but he understood how important it was, because I was kind of blown away, and I was just like at the water. And I remember him standing really far away from me, just like watching, because he knew what I was doing. I mean, he knew that I was praying, he knew that I was listening, you know. Um, so I mean, it's interesting, you know, there are a lot of problems with like what is it? Origin tourism, you know, slavery tourism, all that stuff. But for me, I thought it was like one of the most profound journeys that one could take. I can't imagine. I can't and I didn't necessarily believe so much in the unseen world. I mean, I grew up in the church, um, you know, but like God and stuff like that. And, you know, I have issues with it. And I think Ghana was like a spiritual awakening for me. So.
And like for me, the water. So one of the things I learned is that in Arawak, Guyana means or translates to the land of many waters. And so that just helped me sort of develop these motifs in the work and sort of think about how can I get to my father through water. And so that became a part of the poetry making in the memoir. And so, and also with that, I'm a Pisces and I'm a water sign. So I, in some ways, sort of spiritually reconstruct myself as a fish so that I'm able to navigate the waters and survive. And the other thing, so in mentioning the character Monday Way, in one of like in sort of the beginning drafts of the manuscript, there were so many people, so like so many women being mentioned that it overwhelmed my editor and started to kind of just overwhelm the arc of the story. And so one of the ways that I dealt with that is by creating a composite character called Monday Way. And in the book, I wind up referring to all of my lovers as Rios, which is an acronym for romantic, intimate other. And so the Rios are all sort of responsible in helping me reflect, you know, the things that I need to pay attention to in my heart, in my behavior, so I can see myself clearly beyond default patterns. So they act as a reflective surface to help me get to Guyana and to get to my father and sort of create, you know, this meeting and this return that can aid in my healing. And so I think for me, kind of moving through these sort of immaterial and spiritual worlds were really important, in part because one of the things my father said to me was that, you know, basically it's God that's going to watch out for you. He's the only one that's going to care for your body. And so that sort of forced or encouraged more so like a spiritual narrative to open up in this space for me to think about myself as a spiritual being that's a part of many things and a part of, you know, things that I cannot see. And with that, I felt like I could better occupy absence and distance by being more than just my body. Um, so in that way, and thinking of, you know, just really kind of using the motif of water in all of these different ways to think about really a conjunctive experience, and water serving as and in the book, and a space where where the conjunction was broken. I had to put the water and the and back into myself, back into my relationship with my father, and just sort of this holistic sense of you know, moving out of that kind of narrative of either or, and moving into a more, you know, just holistic way of being. And so water was just the deal for me.
Yeah, I wanted to actually also say that, you know, the highlight of, like, you know, Cape Coast Castle is when the tour guide, you know, leads you to the door of no return, and you look out onto the Atlantic, right? And that was the last step, you know, after would take before they were loaded onto the ships. They would never see their homes again. And so, like, water, you know, that ocean there at that particular point tells like an incredible story, holds incredible stories, you know what I mean? And like there's a poem where I say, if only those waters could tell the tale, you know, like we tell stories of slavery from the land aspect, you know what I mean? But like if we really focused on the water aspect, that would be very, very interesting. You know, just I mean like things like you know, what was it, sharks changed like slavery permanently changed the migratory patterns of sharks, you know, following the slave ships. So it was like, I mean, the entire ecosystem was impacted. Like they were like literally the sharks were following the carnage off the ships, you know, and permanently forever changed their patterns.
Yeah, I think Zandria Phillips and their most recent book, Hull, talks about that phenomenon and generally about like, yeah, that kind of geolog or just environmental, like living water impact of slavery, transcontinental slave trade. Thank you both for those answers. It's making me also think about the way that both of these two new books, and I think Arisa and You're the Most Beautiful Thing That Happened, the speaker talks about a trip to Ghana as well. The connection that both of your work has to the work of Dion Brand and like A Map to the Door of No Return. Reading these books made me want to dive back into that book, definitely. Also, I must mention, I too am a Pisces. And I think Malcolm is also a Pisces. So
Yay, happy
Pisces
birthday,
everyone.
My mother's Pisces.
Oh, wow, great community. Yeah, kind of continuing down that thread of like writing about past relationships. I think that's something that was for me so special about both of these books. Getting to see like Black queer, Black lesbian lust and like love and eroticism, but also like harm and complexity, the speakers being mistreated and mistreating others. And in the books, the way that those relationship dynamics can be kind of traced back to narratives that we get from the speakers' childhoods. I think personally, like, as a Black queer person, I sometimes think myself immune to that kind of like reproduction of harm. But I don't know, I think both of these books paint such a like complete picture of love, like complexity, romance, harm for Black queer people. And I'm just wondering like how you go about revisiting like who you were in these relationships, who you were in relationship with, and like how you bring that to the page, what that process is like.
Well, I know that like there have been issues, like I know that like there have been like Black lesbians who've given me a really hard time about documenting abuse in Black lesbian communities and stuff. And like somebody said, oh, we don't want to admit that, you know, that it exists. And I'm like, what? You know, it's like 2021. I mean, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? And I feel that, you know, I had this conversation with someone a long time ago where they were like, well, what are you talking about exactly? And I said, well, you know, they've made up this whole thing about Black on Black crime. Well, what about queer on queer crime? You know, and then they were like, oh, you know, and I feel like that, you know, I mean, again, we spent so much time surviving and proving ourselves to the outside world that things that we've, you know, ingested, you know, in terms of self-hatred, and some of like, I've been thinking about a lot about reparations to queer people, and I'm writing a piece about that. And I think about like queer dreams and how many were just decimated, you know, because of the fact that like, you know, we couldn't name who we loved. We couldn't like, you know, what happened to our artistry? All these fields that we were like taken out of because we were queer, you know? And part of what got me, you know, thinking about this was like, you know, 30 years ago, I said that I wanted to do a film, and I wanted to play a sort of like a Black female detective and lesbian detective, right? And like 30 years ago, that was impossible. And now they're starting, so now Latifah, now they have like the James Bond person is going to be a Black lesbian. And it's like, but I dreamt that 30 years ago and it was impossible, you know what I mean? And now it will sort of like go into the hands of like these white creatives, you know, and this is like after Stonewall. So then I'm like, what happened to all those queer people before Stonewall? You know what I mean? And what has happened to us and the damage that's been done. And I feel like that as much as we found salvation in relationships with each other, we've also found harm, you know, and it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and I also think it's like, you know, being marginalized and always, you know, growing up and being told like you have to try twice as hard, thrice as hard, you know? And I think that level of stress and exceptionalism is causing so much harm. Like we're hurting and we're hurting each other, we're hurting in ourselves, and and we're needing like space and language around this that's capable of holding the harm we've caused with the beauty that we create, and sort of creating space for all of us, all parts of ourselves to actually enter, and not just the pretty parts, the sellable parts, you know what I mean? It's like our ugly parts need to be there too, and they're just as necessary, and they need to be held and loved and integrated, and talked to so that we can find ways of healing ourselves that don't need to rely on external systems or our governments acknowledging who we are. Like where at the community grassroots level, in our home spaces, how are we tending and caring for each other? And then bringing that out in the world and instead of this sort of, I just feel like we have this culture right now where we're afraid to be vulnerable, where we're afraid to make mistakes because we will be called out. There'll be some hashtag against us. And then once again, silence. We have to navigate a silence that's going to break our hearts. So I'm just trying to find a way to be fully human in this society. And that requires me bearing witness to the parts that aren't pretty, to the anger, to the rage, and how it eats me up. And then when it's done eating me up, I'm ready to eat someone else up with my anger. And so I just think, I'm just trying to find creative use for this energy that has sort of come about through the absorption of so much violence and so many narratives that are about me believing in my victimization. So I just think it's just, when I think about the title of this book, like, Who's Your Daddy? At first, it was this tongue-in-cheek kind of title, just a placeholder. But after a while, it started to reverberate on so many levels, because it was a question too about patriarchy. It was about how the things that are not present are governing us and controlling our behaviors and our intimate dynamics and how we show up in the world and create community and change, so yeah, it's just kind of really thinking about how we can be truly real with each other. And I don't, and we can't do that if we're not showing our asses a bit,
Yeah, that seems like an important directive to like show our asses. So thank you both for that. So we should move on to audience questions. Please, audience, submit any questions that you have. We have one question to start off with. I'll read it. How does the personalization of your writing subvert or queer writing structure, grammar, syntax as we know it? What is necessary to create a new canon of writing?
Well, I feel like one is being formed right now as we speak. I feel like, I sat in on the library journal because they were like looking at Funeral Diva, and it was the first review, and I was like petrified because I've been like, I've been attached by the mainstream, so I was like, oh my God, how's this gonna go, And I waited and I waited, and while I was waiting, like all the librarians like across the country basically get together and present their favorite books, and most of them were from queer people of color, right? And I was like, oh, hallelujah, something new is being born, and I feel like and then they said incredible things about Funeral Diva, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a new time, and people are a little bit more ready. But I feel like we've paved the way forever. It's like Audrey and This Bridge Called My Back, and all the people downtown, it's like, Sapphire, and, everyone. We've been chipping away the other countries collective, we've been Dorothy Allison, we've been chipping away at this canon, for a while, and forming this new language. And finally, I think people are a little bit more ready, so things are getting more diverse. Of course, we need more, it can't be just one or two or three. It has to be, people from every race, every, class, should have access and should be able to publish their stories. But I do think every time, we get our books out, we show somebody that it can be done. We show somebody that, yes, we exist, so yeah, I feel like so many of us have like, pioneered, like somebody said to me, they were like, oh my God, Pamela, I can't believe your perseverance. And it's like, yeah, that's right. You know what I mean? I'll scale the side of a building, you know what I mean, to get it out there. So, you know, a lot of persistence, a lot of people not, you know, and you know, people who haven't had the chance, you know, who like had to be, you know, I mean, what is it? Firebrand books, you know, first published Audrey, first published a lot like Hattie Gossett, you know, a lot of Black women who would never even had publishers, you know what I mean? So this is a lot of people chipping away, you know, to now be able to like begin to see a canon emerging, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I just think just do away with the canon. You know, these are just, you know, instruments of empire and more violence. So no more canon. Um, and I just think like with the personalization sort of our writing, for me in particular, the more that I embrace my sort of quirkiness, my, you know, all my sort of slang vernacular, the Creole, the way that I don't subject verb agree, my mumbling, you know, my granny's voice, my sister's voice. I feel like the more that I tap into these sort of qualities of like my origin stories, my origins, um, that's when the work starts to do some really fun and funky things. And I think as time goes, you know, goes by and the more and more I write, I start to just shake off a lot of my training, a lot of my self-doubt that really is wrapped up in feeling like I'm an imposter. And I have to sort of create these universal narratives, which means an erasure of myself. So the more that I start to put color back into me in the ways that make sense, and my flavor, the work just instantly is queer. It's just, it's so wonderfully and beautifully queer.
Yes, thank you both for that. So our last question from the crowd is, what or which Black queer writers or other artists are you currently excited about?
Hmm. I don't, you know, I've been asked to blurb a lot of books recently. I'm pretty excited. I don't know. I'm pretty excited about, I just read Emmanuel Xavier. Like I'm doing a blurb for a book of poetry that they're doing. And it's like a mix of like Latinx, like ball scene, uh, you know, Bushwick, you know, born. The language of it is so incredible, you know, and like there's some poem I think they say in the, they're talking about the ballroom, and they say, you know, remember, you know, that we are gods, you know, and it's just like, and I just love it, you know, like thinking about like God in the ballroom, and you know, and how we embody gods and goddesses, and it's really wonderful. So them, and then Jamaica Avalon has a lesbian novel coming out. I think there's so many people who are doing such exciting work. Arisa, you know, I'm thrilled about you. You know, I don't know. You know, it's just like there's a lot of people that are gaining steam right now and getting the work out, and it's thrilling.
I'm excited about Alexis Pauline Gumb's work. I'm just really interested in these wonderful ways she brings sort of, you know, like this research scholarship to poetry, to imagining futures. Right now, I just started reading Undrowned and sort of looking at marine mammals as, you know, feminist strategy. And that level of creativity always amazes me. And so that's where I am right now, especially with a lot of the teaching that I have to do, kind of nurturing young queer writers. So right now that's kind of what I've been having space for. Alexis's work.
Yeah, and Sadia Hartman is doing some really exciting stuff. And I didn't know she was queer until I went to some conference, and then she was like, I want to thank my wife. And I was like, all right. So yeah, there's people doing pioneering stuff on all levels.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those suggestions. And again, I just want to say how grateful I am to be in conversation with y'all. And thank you to Canem for having me. Yeah, and unless you both have questions or something to say, I'm going to kick it over to Malcolm.
This was great.
Oh, Malcolm.
Okay, hi, I'm unmuted. Thank you so much for this talk. It was so rich. I have a few notes, and I'm so thankful for that, especially those recommendations at the end. And yeah, a lot of things. I just want to say you can learn more about Canem's events on our website. We'll be at AWP on Sunday, and then our next event I think is on the 16th of March, and then the 24th of March, and then the 26th of March, and a host of events in April. And please go to NYU's Creative Writing Programs page to learn more about their reading series. Joanna does a great job with that reading series as well, of course. And then thank you to Cynthia for throwing hands every time for us. Thank you to Arisa and Pamela for your insightfulness and just your generosity with your time and for joining us and with your work. Always, always, always. Mace, I forgot that we had that Pisces connection along with the Georgia connection, along with the Black and it's a lot happening with us. And Arisa, I think I've kind of felt your Pisces energy just through the email.
You probably did.
Yeah, it was there. So yeah, thank you. I'm so excited about this. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time, and I'm so happy that everybody agreed to take part. I'm looking at my notes to see. Oh, there's a lot of people. I mean, usually there's we'll be hanging out. There's a lot of people who I know their names, but I don't know them personally. But the people that I know are Toy Derricott, who's in the audience, and Danish Finger.
And Toy.
And then Arisa's publishers, Joe is here. So I also want to thank Joe and Argosy for providing the special discount for us tonight. Really appreciate that, of course, and for being so helpful. And I think that's about it for us. I loved all the New York references. So that was cool. So I think, there's the link for the books right there in the chat. One more time, both of them are on sale actually. So lucky Pisces season has brought us gifts, as it always does. So I think that's about it. And I'm gonna say good night. Oh, Arisa, you are on a little mini tour or virtual tour, right? So you have a couple of events. Do you want to talk about a couple of your events that you have coming up?
Oh yeah, so I have a reading tomorrow at Print, a bookstore in Portland at 7 p.m. And then there's a few things with AWP. So just find me on Instagram at Arisa A. White and find me on Twitter. So I'm just regularly posting a whole bunch of things for that.
Great. And then Pamela, do you have events coming up?
Okay. Yeah, I have a ton, but I can't remember any. I'm a feature in it's coming out in a new issue of Freeze in a couple of weeks. I know they're publishing A Tale of Two Pandemics, so that'll be good. What is it? I'm going to be a panelist with the Ford Foundation coming up. Oh, okay. Now it's all coming back to me. And then Bad, I think on the 19th of this month.
Is that with Lambda? Is that with Lambda Literary?
No, that, well,
Okay.
Charles Bryce Gonzalez, you know, and Arthur Villas, you know, they run bad. And
Okay.
they invited me to read. But yeah, like join me on Instagram. It's Pamela_Sneed, or, you know, I don't think anybody's on Facebook anymore except me, except all the old people. But definitely follow my Instagram. And I have like work up in 3 shows. One opened last night, hook.com, and it's all queer visual artists. And I cover the queer activism piece. So
Wow,
Nice.
wow. Okay. I love all of this. This was so great. Thank you all. I'll
Thank
be
you so
smiling all
much.
night.
Me too.
thank you for
I was
inviting. Thank you.
so
No
great.
problem. Okay, I'm gonna close it out and say good night to everyone, and I'll see you next time.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Congrats, Arisa. Enjoy.